My last and I think possibly one of my most important questions for you is, in my heart, I firmly believe that there was an orchestrated conspiracy against your brother's research. Do you believe that there was a conspiracy against Ron Wyatt?
I believe it with my whole heart. I believe it with everything that I am. I've saw it in actions. I felt it with me.
So has the Ark of the Covenant really been found? I came across a few videos a while back of a guy named Kevin Cash, whose major purpose here on TikTok was to show that the Ark of the Covenant has indeed been found. In fact, it's been known for over 40 years apparently. On January 6, 1982, a man by the name of Ron Wyatt said to have discovered the Ark of the Covenant, which was located about 20 feet below Christ's crucifixion site. Now, isn't that interesting?
Dr. Ron Wyatt. So
oh no. Is this photo for real? Is this photo for real? Does this actually come from them? I'm asking the question.
I think you're jealous.
You think I'm jealous? Is that a bathtub in the middle of the desert? All right. The text does not say anywhere that the rock was split. This is pareidolia. I see nothing. I see a white circle and a dot. No, it's not the real Mount Sinai.
At least he didn't lie about his name.
Miles west of Jerusalem, archaeologists found this biblically accurate stone matching the description of the Ark of the Covenant.
Hey everybody, no they didn't. Every single word of this is wrong and that picture is fake. To begin, Ron Wyatt only ever claimed to have seen the Ark of the Covenant underneath the Garden Tomb, which is not 12 miles west of Jerusalem, but in Jerusalem. Ron Wyatt also claimed that God made it so all the pictures he tried to take of it were too fuzzy to be of any use. So that is a staged photograph. That is not Ron.
Well, once again, Mount Ararat is in the news.
Researchers in Turkey now claim they found indisputable evidence that the story of Noah's Ark was not a cautionary tale, but a verifiable historical event.
Noah's Ark has been found. Well, has it? We certainly don't believe it has, actually.
We can rule out the Dura-Pinar site as being Noah's Ark. It is truly just a geologic formation.
That particular site has been researched carefully by our geologist, Dr. Andrew Snelling, and other geologists and archaeologists. But let's consider this. The Bible says the ark landed on the mountains of Ararat, not Mount Ararat, but the mountains of Ararat. It doesn't specify which particular mountain. Now, there's a particular claim that there's a site at the foot of Mount Ararat. It resurfaces in the news now and then, as it has again recently, to say, oh, this is the remains of Noah's Ark.
Now that we've heard from the popular top-notch creationists that all weirdly and oddly enough happen to agree with the godless heathen atheists, let's hear from Ron Wyatt.
Well, I believe that we are living in the last generation on planet Earth as it is today. And I believe that God is getting everyone's attention so that no one will be lost without having had an opportunity to see the truth and accept it and to make the necessary changes. I believe that I was the only one that volunteered at the time when God was ready to reveal all these things. And like my critics say, it's impossible for one person to find all these things. And that's true. But all things are possible through God. And He simply revealed all of these things in a manner where no one should be misled as to who has revealed this. I'm not clever enough to have found all these places and objects. So this is something that God has taken into His own hands and is doing a show and tell presentation of His treasures, His archaeological treasures, in a manner that is designed to strengthen the faith of the believers and to convince those who have seen no good reason to believe what Christians have to say, to convince them that the Bible is historically accurate and divinely inspired.
Alright, so the giant conspiracy plot against Mr. Ron Wyatt, and what would top-notch creationists have to gain from conspiring against Mr. Ron Wyatt? Because oddly enough, you would think that someone like Ron Wyatt would be a natural ally to the young Earth creationists. They would work hand in hand. You have claims being made by young Earth creationists. They're conducting apologetics. And then you have someone like Ron Wyatt, who spent time and resources going out on his own to prove these claims accurate and to find the locations that the creationists talk about. They should be best friends, but they're not, and that's weird. Out of all the top-tier creationists, there are very few that defend the work of Ron Wyatt. One of which is Dr. Kent Hovind. Big shout out to my personal friend, Dr. Kent Hovind. Thank you, sir, for being bold and having courage to stand for truth and not buckle under pressure like Kent Ham and Eric Hovind and the rest of the creationists did. You are the real VIP, sir. Now, what I have to do for you is I have to walk you down a road that could possibly prove that there is foul play, that there is a conspiracy. I have to walk you through various points that I'm going to show to explain what the creationist would gain from hiding these types of discoveries. Number one, scientific and historical credibility. You know, Mr. Wyatt's claims are widely regarded as fake science. They're not recognized by almost any of the top-tier creationists, which we're going to be addressing. Now, part of the reason for this, the scientific and historical credibility. Young Earth creationists already go up against a mass amount of criticism simply for defending the Bible, much less making a claim that we have found tangible items from the Bible, which is what Mr. Ron Wyatt did. What Ron Wyatt did is had enough courage to push past the scrutiny, which almost none of the current creationists have. It's something seen in only the likes of Ron Wyatt and Kent Hovind. As you can see, this may cause a greater deal of scrutiny for any creationist who decides to even try to examine Ron Wyatt's claims. Perfect example, Answers in Genesis has a detailed article explaining why they don't accept Wyatt's discoveries. I'm going to be showing you some of that too, citing things like poor documentation and lack of peer review. The funny thing is about that, Kent Ham, is that all of these sites have been open to the public. The public. So if the very unwealthy Ron Wyatt can save his pennies and work hard and travel overseas, why haven't you done it? Citing poor documentation and lack of peer review. Kent Ham, are you insane? How could Ron Wyatt possibly prevent you from reviewing his research? Ron Wyatt's artifacts have almost always been open to the public. When they weren't sitting in a museum with the Reed family, they've been in the basement of Ron, very open to anybody who wants to examine them. The reason I know this is because I have called Mary Nell, Ron's widowed wife. I've spoken to her many times. I've interviewed her on my channel. And guess what? I've been to her home. I've been in her home to examine the artifacts. I've seen them for myself. I've done the real research that Answers in Genesis refuses to do because they can't hold up to the scientific scrutiny, because you need a ministry leader with a backbone and they lack that. My second reason for stating that there is a conspiracy against the beloved Ron Wyatt is protecting the core message. Young Earth creationists want to focus attention on the authority of the Bible in a literal Genesis timeline supported by their interpretation of science. Rom's claims can become a distraction, and if proven false, could damage the credibility of their broader biblical message. They didn't want attention taken away from proving the accuracy of the Bible, and by doing that, they actually shot themselves in the foot, because they took away their evidence for their claims. You know, we are all separate bodies of Christ. Not everyone is a foot, not everyone is a hand. Some of us, God has designed to run and found young creation ministries. Others, He has instructed to go digging for the proof. We're supposed to work hand in hand. But when we have spineless creationists at the top literally conspiring against righteous men of God, just so they don't have to have as much scrutiny, shame. They prefer to promote carefully vetted claims such as radiometric dating critiques or flood geology rather than archaeological sensationalism. The problem is they refused to even look at the evidence. And then once they did look at the evidence, in the few cases that they did, the one particular being the Noah's Ark site, which is funny because now for over 30 years, they cannot crush the Turkish Noah's Ark site, the Ron Wyatt Noah's Ark site. No matter how many articles Answers in Genesis puts out, it's irrelevant. My third reason for this giant conspiracy against Ron Wyatt is control over narrative and apologetics. Major young earth creation organizations, they spend significant resources creating coherent apologetic systems. Wyatt's unverified and controversial discoveries fall outside of their control and don't fit neatly into their well-organized narrative. See, some godly men are willing to fight the fights that they know are going to hurt. The fights that they know it's going to be a close match. Other men will only pick fights with smaller men. Those are not men at all. Answers in Genesis does not want to take on the scrutiny of somebody claiming that they've literally found Mount Sinai. Even though we have so much evidence, it should literally put Answers in Genesis out of business. They claim to see him as a loose cannon, whose claims could blow up in the face of criticism. Except it's been 30 years and it hasn't. And all the atheists and top creationists can mock Ron and his research all they want, but that's why after 30 years, even 2 months ago, they're still conducting scans of the Noah's Ark site and finding non-natural formations. They're finding materials that are not natural forming. This has all been proven by Ron 30 years ago, of course, but the lying creationists refused to accept it. They refused to give up any control of their tightly kept secrets. Number 4 is the theological concerns. Some young Earth creationist leaders have expressed concern that Wyatt's approach can encourage a kind of faith through artifacts, where belief hinges on the physical discovery of biblical artifacts. No, this runs counter to the faith-based approach that many conservative Christians, including YECs, emphasize. The issue with this strategy also is that the Bible tells us if we won't cry out, that nature itself will cry out. Just like if we stand before God and tell him on Judgment Day that we didn't believe, nature itself will cry out and call us a liar. So right now, at a time where most Christians would agree we're nearing the end, we are approaching the final times of this life, it would only make sense that the Lord would not just give us evidences of his creation, but evidence of his right to judge the world, and give something to the atheists to say, you are without excuse. I gave you the evidence. I gave you the artifacts. You had no reason to doubt. It was because you were willingly ignorant at that point. Number 5, preserving institutional authority. And this one, I think, is one of the most prominent points. So really try to focus with me on here. Preserving institutional authority. Discrediting Ron Wyatt helps reinforce the authority of establishing young Earth creation institutions. If an independent figure like Ron Wyatt is embraced without power vetting, it could weaken the institutional gatekeeping that these organizations rely on to maintain influence among unity with their followers. So for 40, 50, 60 years, going all the way back to Noah's Ark probably, pastors have been sitting on their hands, young Earth creationists have been sitting on their hands, they've been practicing apologetics, except they have never produced anything. They've told us to our face time and time again that you have to take it all on faith. That you have to take it all on faith because none of these places exist. None of these locations are probably even around anymore. And then Ron Wyatt, someone, mind you, who is not a professional archaeologist. He is a archaeologist enthusiast. He works in the medical industry. He's saving his own pennies and trying to collect donations from churches who will have him to do his own independent research. Ron Wyatt did what none of the creationists did. While all the creationists were wasting your money, your donations, and telling you that, oh, we'll put this towards defending the faith part of the Bible because none of the other stuff exists, Ron Wyatt was getting his hands dirty. He was putting Kent Hands to shame by going out and conducting real scientific research, unlike anything Answers in Genesis produces. And he was, in 3 years, Ron Wyatt had discovered everything. Ron Wyatt had found the Red Sea crossing with chariot wheels at the bottom. We'll provide photos. He found Mount Sinai with the rocks at the top still scorched. Young Earth creationists will tell you that that's desert varnish, but that's a lie from the pit of hell, and these creationists know that. When Answers in Genesis tells you that at the Mount Sinai location in Saudi Arabia it's desert varnish, ask Kent Ham how it could only be desert varnish on one side of the rocks from the top of the mountain, and ask him why it's only on the peak. I bet he gives you a very flimsy answer if he even has the backbone to answer you at all. That is the Mount Sinai location, and they know it. They don't want your scrutiny. We've also located Sodom and Gomorrah. I have held the sulfur balls in my hand. They burn 98% pure. Purest concentrate of sulfur we have found anywhere on the face of the planet, and it just so happens to be the location that Ron Wyatt claims to be Sodom and Gomorrah. How very odd. So odd. So see, it looks really bad for creationists who have been blowing your millions, if not billions of dollars, with the same old song and dance, the same old, we can get better at defending the Bible by learning it more. That's terrific. But you can also get your hands dirty, put some people in the field, and validate these claims. You can give atheists a reason to believe. You can strip away atheists from their excuse to not believe. Why would you not do it? Every Christian would tell you, we want to know where the real ark is. And then you're going to stand here straight-faced and discredit the works of a man like Ron Wyatt. That's shameful. So, in summary, popular young earth creationists, they discredit Ron, his claims, not because they oppose the idea of biblical archaeology, and because his methods and evidence are seen as unreliable and potentially harmful. It's the broader mission of promoting a liberal Genesis within a structured, scientifically framed apologetic. Alright, so let's just recap. Number one reason for conspiring against Ron Wyatt: protecting the institutional control and gatekeeping. Young Earth Creation Ministries like Answers in Genesis or ICR have spent decades building controlled narratives about the Bible, science, and even history. If an independent, self-taught figure like Ron Wyatt made world-changing discoveries outside their oversight, it would, 1, undermine their authority and centralize control over the YEC apologetics. It'd create pressure to restructure their materials or endorse things they can't verify. And 3, it would challenge the reputation of their scholars, which I think are garbage. So, number 2, fear of embarrassment or discredit. Some believe that the YEC institutions fear ridicule from secular academia if they endorse fringe claims. Ron Wyatt's discoveries are often seen by mainstream scientists, and sometimes, sadly, even some Christians, as sensational, undocumented, or pseudo-scientific. The problem with this is that, it would make young earth creation groups even more marginalized, which I understand. There's always going to be a fear of that. There's always going to be some pushback. Lead to legal or financial problems if donors of these ministries promote false claims. And in the light, the conspiracy would be to silence what could be true, simply because it's too risky for PR, for public reputation, or to pull all the inaccurate books off your shelves. Number 3, doctrinal and theological concerns. Wyatt made bold spiritual claims, including seeing blood on the Ark of the Covenant, seeing angels lift the mercy seat off the Ark of the Covenant, claiming divine visions and supernatural confirmations. Some young earth creationist leaders might be uncomfortable with this kind of charismatic theology, where they tend to put less stock into miracles. It's almost like we serve a dead God in 2025, but I personally believe nothing could be farther from the truth. God absolutely still performs miracles. God absolutely still performs divine intervention. He absolutely gives visions and supernatural confirmations. If you don't believe that, you can't believe that Ron Wyatt was used by God. Alright, so those are my reasons for why I think that there is a giant conspiracy against Mr. Ron Wyatt. I'm open to the criticism. If you can give me valid reasons why Answers in Genesis has spent the bester part of 30 years being the main advocate to discredit Ron Wyatt, I'm willing to listen. But I refuse to believe that Answers in Genesis has spent 30 years discrediting Ron Wyatt if he's just a nobody with no points and a laughingstock. He wouldn't address it. You know, Ken Ham will never address this video that I'm making right now because he will see it as below him. And he would have thought the same about Ron Wyatt, except I don't think it's accurate. I believe in my heart that the likes of Ken Ham and all of his young earth creation allies are in a conspiracy against Ron Wyatt to hold the narrative, to prevent further scrutiny, and they don't want to give credit to an amateur archaeologist who found in 3 years what they told us for our entire life didn't exist anymore. It not just makes young earth creationists look stupid, it makes us look foolish, and everyone who donated money to those ministries that mocked Ron Wyatt, it makes them look stupid and foolish. They can't have that. You know, how can you mock and discredit someone for 30 plus years and then fess up and tell the truth that you were wrong? God is the controller of this universe, and he has foreknowledge and more wisdom than I could ever dream of. So I will just say it's a good thing I'm not God. Because I'll tell you, I would have discredited Answers in Genesis many years ago, and I would have installed the likes of Ron Wyatt on a pedestal. I never would have gone around trying to discredit him. I would never go around lying about the man not allowing his artifacts to be peer-reviewed, since his stuff has been on display for the better part of 30 years. So that's where I would begin. You have to be a very big man to admit when you were wrong. And that's why you will never see Ken Ham, Eric Hovind, or any of the rest of them come forward and admit that they were wrong, and admit that they have been trying to conspire against the research of Ron Wyatt. Because 1, he was a nobody. 2, he was not part of their good old boy club. 3, they thought that his artifact discovery was going to take away from the faith element of our religion, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So there's various reasons. They will never apologize. Answers in Genesis will never retract what they're saying. It doesn't matter how much organic material the new Noah's Ark scans find in the Turkish site. It doesn't matter if they found a sign inside the formation that said Noah was here. They would still deny it, because they cannot give credit to Ron Wyatt. It opens them all up for scrutiny. It opens them all up to ridicule from the atheists, who for some reason they care more about offending than the Christian family of Ron Wyatt. They'll never do it. So, I think, together with some of the things I've shown, I've at least painted a decent picture for you of why there would be a conspiracy plot against the man Ron Wyatt. A conspiracy plot that has gone on long past his death, and a conspiracy plot that is being unfoiled as we speak because of new research being done by the Noah's Ark scan team. Hopefully, this type of research brings corrupted Young Earth Creation Ministries tumbling to the ground and lifts up creation ministries like ronwyatt.com, who I would strongly suggest you guys go support. ronwyatt.com and ronwyatt.com YouTube channel are the actual entities you can go to for the Ron Wyatt research, artifacts, and information, including what's going on today. It's going to all be coming out soon. God is good. He's going to get the glory. And finally, Ron Wyatt, my personal hero, is going to get the credit for being the obedient one to the Lord. So, you guys tell me, was there a conspiracy to hide the research of Ron Wyatt? Seems like it. One of the largest forms of child abuse that happens in 2024 but gets swept under the rug and is rarely even given a second thought is evolution. No, hear me out. It is morally repulsive to teach a child that they come from monkeys, that they are a happy accident, that they are the result of beneficial mutations over large periods of time, that they have no value, they have no soul, they have no future, and they have no purpose.
We want to change people's worldview. There are two ways to look at this world. That's called your worldview. How do you view this world? Some people look at the world one way and some look at it another way. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the way you view the world determines how you will answer the four great questions of life. There are four fundamental questions that every single religion on planet Earth tries to answer. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going when I die? The way you answer those questions is totally determined by your worldview. Some people look at the world and say, you know, it's amazing, a Big Bang made this from nothing. That's the humanist worldview based on the evolution theory. Other people look at the world and say, you know, there's incredible design. There must be a designer. That's the creationist worldview based on creation. And those two worldviews are at war with each other. I mean, somebody is wrong. And I enjoy showing them who they are.
Well, if they are violating the law, what are my options? Just let them do it? Just like Adolf Hitler, you just let them do it? I mean, I would suspect, I don't know, I would suspect that all three, the judge, Schneider, and U.S. Attorney, are nervous that I'm going to go back and sue them again for all the stuff they did wrong. See, it's all now public record. I mean, it's part of a transcript. So there's probably a lot of things we could do to make life real miserable for IRS agents because they just plain lied and broke the law.
You realize if this is recorded and gets out, I'm going to have so much, like, I could die from this.
Okay, well, when you reached out, I was excited. I didn't
Steven,
think you were going to be telling me about murder.
You know that we can share secret information without it leaking. Like, we've already...
Yes, we have.
We're on the level.
Who was Mark going to murder? Was it Kent?
Okay. So, and again, I would never reveal that publicly, but Mark said that out loud, publicly.
Yep. I remember.
So it's not me revealing this. This is what Mark said. Mark was freaking out. And he was getting a plane ticket. He wanted to go do what Zaire and their family was going to do so that they didn't get in trouble. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm going to go do it so that Zaire doesn't get in trouble. But then Skylar talked him out of it. He's like, you got to think of your daughter. You can't do this. He was like freaking out. Mm-hmm. And Skylar convinced him not to do it.
Turned down for what?
DVD number 5 was going to be the end-all to the lies we teach our children in the textbooks. And DVD number 5 is why they really needed to get rid of Dr. Kent Hovind. Enter Exhibit A. DVD number 5. DVD number 5 is what cost Kent Hovind 10 years of his life. The United States government would frame it as structuring. An individual taking amounts under the $10,000 threshold, which would then populate the required forms being filed for the IRS to follow along with those large transactions. It's a law that was created to try to detour drug dealers from being able to easily do business. It was made for criminals, but it was somehow used against a pastor running a small theme park in Pensacola, Florida, to lock him up for 10 years, off floppy evidence at that. This is what happened. Buckle up. You have got to see this ride. It's gonna be fun. This is an article from NCSE, National Center for Science Education, July 14th, 2006. Kent Hovind arrested on federal charges. Kent Hovind, the evangelist who styles himself Dr. Dino and runs the Creation Science Evangelism Ministry as well as Dinosaur Adventureland, a small creationist theme park in Pensacola, Florida, was arrested on July 13th, 2006. On 58 federal charges. The Pensacola News-Journal, July 14, 2006, reports that in court, Hovind professed not to understand the basis for the indictment. "I still don't understand what I'm being charged for, and who is charging me," he said. The News-Journal adds that Hovind has been sparring with the IRS for at least 17 years on his claims that he is employed by God, receives no income, has no expenses, and owns no property. This was the cover charge that they would blanket over Kent Hovind in order to help make him go away. The reason they wanted to make Kent Hovind go away was because of DVD number 5. And as we go along in this episode further, we will show how DVD number 5 is referenced by SWAT teams that are searching Kent Hovind's residence when they arrest him and Mrs. Hovind, and even refuse her the right to get dressed before being dragged down for interrogation, something that's usually reserved for hardened drug dealers. How did Kent Hovind get on the radar? Well, there's multiple stories about how this could have happened, but the two most likely stories is that the IRS noticed Kent Hovind on a television station, Kent Hovind bragging about the way he structures his taxes, and the IRS happened to catch an episode of it, and they went to figure it out. The other story is that Kent Hovind was turned in by Rebecca Horton, Pensacola Christian College senior vice president. This was back in the 1990s. She somehow figured out about Kent Hovind's anti-tax stand, which is hilarious because he's never been openly against taxes. He's just against taxes that he doesn't owe. And she turned him in. This gets into a whole tangled mess with Glenn Stoll, who had his own issues with the IRS.
I have this press release from the Department of Justice, stated April 27, 2005. I'm not going to, I'll read the whole thing, but I'll just give you some of the high points. That Glenn Stoll of Edmonds, Washington, was barred from promoting a tax fraud scheme using sham trusts. Do you think that that's what might have happened to you? Was this association with Glenn Stoll?
Well, you'd have to take that sentence at a time. I agree that nobody should get into a tax fraud scheme, and I wasn't, and I don't think he is either. Read that first sentence very slowly and carefully. What is it?
Sure.
New reaction from some of the small business owners targeted by an IRS law that is designed to catch criminals. The IRS permitted to seize bank accounts without a warrant and without even filing any criminal charges. But now some of these innocent Americans affected say that it has taken a big toll on their lives. And how could it not? No doubt. That is one of the clients that is represented by Larry Salzman in this case. He is with the Institute for Justice. Larry, welcome. Good to have you here. So this law, just to catch everybody up at home, if you make deposits smaller than $10,000, which many small businesses do across the country because they want to get that cash out of their, the business and put it into the bank so it's in a safe place, but that can trigger an IRS investigation, and then they can take the money out of your account on suspicion that maybe you're a drug dealer or maybe you're up to something no good because you're trying to keep it under that 10,000 threshold, correct?
That's right. The problem here are civil forfeiture laws. Civil forfeiture laws allow the government to take your property without charging you, let alone convicting you of any crime based upon a mere suspicion that your property is involved in crime.
And we want to support our
By strange coincidence, I'm sure, there is a plethora of strange happenstances surrounding the case concerning Kent Hovind and the IRS. Just to name a few, let's go down a list. The IRS SWAT team in 2006. Pastor Hovind and his wife were arrested at gunpoint and refused the right to get dressed. This is an abuse and a travesty against a pastor in the United States of America. This was one of the first falls of the United States Constitution concerning how religious leaders are treated in the United States. Pastor Hovind's wife served jail time too, a much lesser sentence, however, than Kent, as a warning to submit and take what was coming his way. What a terrible feeling of destitute. To know that you're being ramrodded by the United States government, and to also know that you have to sit there and take it. You have to sit there and watch your rights be violently stolen from you, or else, if you speak out against it, your wife could lose her freedom. Next up, U.S. Attorney Michelle M. Heldmeyer and Assistant U.S. Attorney John David Roy Atchison. This is some of the most interesting facts pertaining to the entire case, things that are always looked over. And by the time we get done painting this entire picture for you, you'll understand exactly why a small town pastor from Pensacola, Florida, spent 8 years in federal prison over taxes. In 1993, Judge Richard Credler was busted for illegal porn. He then committed suicide. 1 year later, in 1994, Michelle Hedmeyer, U.S. Attorney versus Kent Hovind, made national news when it was discovered that her husband, Joseph Hedmeyer, was on the same mailing list as Judge Credler. There was not sufficient evidence to convict Michelle Hedmeyer, but what's interesting is that her husband was also never convicted. How very, very interesting. An assistant U.S. Attorney John David Roy Atchison committed suicide after being caught trying to sexually exploit and rape a child that was only 5 years old, only days after prosecuting Kent Hovind.
New at 5, a disturbing case of perverted justice. He's sworn to uphold the law, to prosecute those who commit crimes. But tonight, this man, a Justice Department officer, is charged after being caught in an internet sexting involving children. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And we do want to tell you that we should caution you. What you're learning tonight is very disturbing.
Yes, an assistant U.S. attorney from Florida finds himself on the wrong side of the law tonight. He's accused of going after a 5-year-old girl from right here in Metro Detroit.
The intended victim is from Macomb County. The Florida lawman is from a town of Pensacola down in Florida. But at this hour, he's being held in a local jail cell. Local 4 Steve Garagiola is live in downtown Detroit with more on how this case came down.
Oh, it is just incredibly disturbing. Not only is this guy an assistant United States attorney, but he's also president of a youth sports association in the city where he lives near Pensacola, Florida. So he's got a lot of contact with young children. Now, this was a sting operation, so there is no actual victim in this case. But what is truly frightening is that based on statements from the accused, there are very likely many real children out there who are victims. John David Atchison, arrested yesterday at Metro Airport upon arrival from Florida, made his first appearance in Detroit federal court today. According to a deposition from the FBI special agent in charge of the investigation, Atchison told the undercover detective to tell her daughter that, quote, "You found her a sweet boyfriend who will bring her presents." The undercover detective expressed concern about physical injury to a 5-year-old girl engaged in sexual activity. The suspect responds, "I am always gentle and loving, not to worry." Most disturbing to investigators is the suspect's third response. When the detective asks, "How can you be certain there will be no injury?" The suspect responds, "Just gotta go slow and very easy. I've done it plenty." Atchison is 53 years old, an assistant United States attorney in Pensacola, Florida, who described himself online as a family man.
Now, what's interesting about all this is that Judge Casey Rogers, overseeing the entire court matter, told Kent Hovind that his tax charges were worse than rape, and we'll go over that later. But what's funny about that is I can't help but wonder if she knew that one of the prosecutors, the assistant prosecutor, was going to be busted for trying to rape a 5-year-old just a few days later. And I also wonder if she knew that the senior prosecutor on the case's husband was on a mailing list for illegal pornography. And I'm not going to tell you what type of illegal pornography, but as you can imagine, it's a very heartbreaking type. Even though there was not sufficient evidence to convict Michelle Hedmeyer, her husband, who was on the mailing list and it was confirmed, was never convicted. How interesting. Judge Margaret Casey Rogers makes a chilling statement that Kent Hovind's tax charges were worse than rape. Later, that was erased from the court transcript, which is funny considering how we mentioned before that both the prosecutors were related to child rape and pornography.
From those original charges.
Pensacola, New Jersey. Yeah. But his original charges should be overturned. The original case, Judge Margaret Casey. Yeah, but
You realize the same judge was the judge in his first trial? And the same cheat sheet, the same prosecution, and this IRS. You ever read the book Les Miserables?
What they did to Kent Hovind was worse than rape. Now, Dr. Gray Dixon, along with 7 other witnesses of the trial, heard Judge Casey Rogers make the statement that Kent Hovind's charge was worse than rape. What crime was worse than rape? Structuring.
And I'm speaking to you about structuring deposits to evade reporting requirements, commonly referred to as structuring. The Bank Secrecy Act requires that any cash transaction over $10,000 has a currency transaction reporting, and that has to be filed.
Kent Hovind spent 8 years locked up for withdrawing his own money in amounts of under $10,000 so that it wouldn't need to be reported by the IRS, something literally almost everyone in the United States has done at some point or another. To request an appeal, you have to have the court transcript. Kent Hovind had the official transcript withheld from him until the appeal was 4 months after the deadline. This is a national injustice. Kent Hovind was manipulated, he was shamed, he had all his rights as an American taken away from him, and Judge Casey Rogers still walks the streets as a free woman after violating an American citizen's constitutional rights. This is one of the biggest travesties in American history. Did we mention how Judge Casey Rogers hates Christians? Well, interesting fact. Judge Casey Rogers has a harsh record towards believers. She issued a contempt order against 2 school teachers for praying before eating. She wanted to have them arrested. The source is Washington Times, September 17th, 2009. The article was called "Lawmakers Back Officials Facing Jail for Praying." The same judge gave Kent Hovind 10 years. Was also appointed a case later on concerning Kent Hovind, which was ultimately dismissed, where she tried to give Kent Hovind a life sentence for alleged mail fraud. Wow, talk about nothing to see here, people. No, nothing to see here at all. And this judge is still on the streets, persecuting believers to this day. This woman is being a menace to society, and we're giving her one of the most honored positions in the United States justice system. It's disgusting that Casey Rogers is still a judge.
All right, we have Kent Hovind on the line. He's talking to Nico right now. We're going to put him on the board and go to him as soon as they're ready. He is a political prisoner, and he'll only have 15 minutes on the line with us. We're going to go to Kent Hovind right now, political prisoner, more than a decade in prison, indicted under structuring that the New York Times will put on screen, last year admitted is a total criminal fraud. Hearings last month in Congress admitting it's incredible. You simply take money out of your own bank account as cash, and they claim that you're trying to steal money and launder it, and then they put a preacher who reached over 1 billion people in 30-plus languages, exposing the myth of modern Darwinism as a socialist religion.
Well, thank you so much, sir. It's an honor. I've loved your program for years. Yes, I certainly feel like a POW, prisoner of war. In case folks haven't followed it, there's a whole lot of tons of information on 2Peter3.com, just the number 2, the word Peter, and the number 3. For 2 Peter 3 in the Bible. To summarize quickly, I was a high school science and math teacher for 15 years, moved to Pensacola in 1989, became an evangelist traveling the world speaking on the subject of creation, evolution, and dinosaurs. And I was targeted very early by the IRS, the early 90s. I tried everything to find out, what do you want? I answered their letters. They never answered mine. Finally, they came with a SWAT team and threw everybody off the property, held my wife hostage for 17 hours, made her open the church safe, took all the money out of there. It's just a long, sad story, and everything is up on 2 Peter 3, and we have tried everything. So,
let's talk diesel therapy. In 8 years, Kent Hovind was moved around the country 23 times. What this does is it prevents your family from coming to support you and visit you in fellowship and give you that mental healing and therapy that you desire, but also it increases your chance of being brutally hurt or murdered. When you move an inmate around prisons that many times, it increases the chance and possibility of them being placed with a violent criminal. They were trying to kill Kent Hovind to cover up what they did. Because what they did is one of the most illegal travesties in the United States justice system. On top of this, 2 different jurors were dismissed in order to obtain the conviction. How interesting. How interesting that we're never told that in order to convict Kent Hovind, in addition to the jurors having to listen to how his charges were worse than rape, which I mind you, it is a judge's obligation to be unbiased. The jurors pass the judgment, the judge gives the punishment. IRS Special Agent Scott Schneider, he seized just over $42,000 from the CSE ministry safe. IRS Special Agent Scott Schneider stole $42,000 from God, from a ministry. Then, to cover his tail, he created a tax bill for the exact amount, $42,000. What a heinous crime in the United States of America. In addition to all this, there was an internet petition with over 19,000 signatures to free Kent Hovind. It vanished from the internet, along with all the video footage from the arrest and trial and the IRS raid. If you do an internet search, you will find link after link after link where the IRS was admitting blame and it was taken and scrubbed off the internet. Almost every video you find from the time Kent Hovind was arrested and raided by the IRS has been completely scrubbed off the internet. Very funny. Super suspicious, in my opinion. In my very humble opinion. Why do you scrub the internet of all the video? Maybe because you know what you did was highly illegal, highly immoral, and one day you'll have to answer for it if you don't cover your tracks and hide all your evidence. The people who have things scrubbed off the internet and have petitions taken down are people with something to hide. In addition to this, it's important that every believer throughout the United States starts contacting their congressmen and has this case looked into, has Kent Hovind's charges overturned, and completely pays restitution to give Kent Hovind back something for the 8 years that they stole from him. They also owe his wife restitution for the time they stole from her life. This act that happened is disgusting, and it's on par with the type of things that happened in communist Russia, where Judge Casey Rogers is no better than a communist Russian. Alright, so let me start drawing together some loose ends for you. You want to know if Kent Hovind didn't really go to prison for his tax structuring, then what did Kent Hovind go to prison for? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's DVD number 5. Well, what's wrong with DVD number 5? DVD number 5 is absolutely a masterpiece among Kent Hovind material. Bear in mind, at one point in time, Kent Hovind was among the 10 most famous Christians in the world. DVD number 5 touched on taxes. It touched on the dangers of evolution, how teaching children that they're animals leads to things like school deletions, mass school deletions, and in addition to that, it taught how racist of a theory evolution and Darwinism is, and how people like Hitler used it to eliminate Jewish peoples. DVD number 5 went into great detail about how most great tragedies throughout time have been the result or the outcome of teachings from evolution.
This is public enemy number one. Evolution is a dangerous philosophy. Now, I taught science for years. I like science, and I'm not against the science, but folks, there's some just plain old poison mixed in these science books. I believe evolution is a dangerous theory for seven reasons. It is based on nothing but lies. And Satan is the father of lies, okay? The evolution theory removes all morality and all way to discover how to have morality. It's the foundation for humanism, racism, Nazism, communism, and the New World Order, coming soon to a city near you. We'll get into all that as we go along here. Evolution is not only a dangerous theory because it's based on lies only, it's dangerous because it removes all morality. Huxley said, I suppose the reason we leapt at origin of species was the idea of God interfered with our sexual mores. Ooh, we don't want God telling us we can't commit adultery. You know, Joseph Stalin ordered the execution of 14,700 Polish officers, prisoners of war. Why would you execute prisoners of war? I mean, what happened to the Geneva Convention, you know? Why did Hitler kill 6 million people, at least, maybe more? Why did Pol Pot of the Khmer Rouge kill 1/3 of his entire population? I mean, 1/3 of all the Cambodians were killed. Why? Why were the Aborigines treated like animals? They were rounded up and slaughtered. Every single Tasmanian Aborigine was killed. Kip Kinkle said, if there was a God, he wouldn't let me feel the way I do. There is no God, only hate. What happened to Kip Kinkle? Well, in 1998, Kip Kinkle walked into the cafeteria, shot 50 rounds from a semi-automatic rifle, 26 students injured, 2 killed. Later, the bodies of his parents were found in his home. He was arrested, taken to police headquarters where he attempted to murder a detective during his initial questioning. Almost right after the shooting, 5 more students within the Springfield School District in Oregon were arrested for threatening to murder students. One elementary kid shot 5 of his classmates with a BB gun. If there's a God, he wouldn't let me feel the way I do. Well, maybe if Kip Kinkle had been learning, hey, there is a God and he loves you and he's got a plan for your life and you better do what he says, maybe he wouldn't do that kind of thing. Could it be that what we're teaching our kids is causing this problem? See, God's plan is to fill the earth with people. Satan wants exactly the opposite. The Bible says God formed it to be inhabited. Very different in that pre-flood world. We covered that on video 6 of our Blue series. God saw everything and it was very good. That's perfect. That's the way I want it. Satan's plans put it back to 0. He wants to reduce human population with reduced birth rates by abortion. RU-486. By the way, interesting. In the military, when they want to throw something away, what do they call it? You're going to 86 it, right? Are you for 86? You for throwing this kid away? I wonder if they picked that number on accident or on purpose. Birth control, homosexuality, lower cholesterol, that lowers fertility. High cost of living, smaller families, eugenics. High infant mortality rate.
DVD number 5 was a threat to the New World Order. DVD number 5 was a threat to the government institution. It was a threat to the swamp. DVD number 5 exposed government corruption. It exposed it in a legislative level. It exposed government corruption to the judicial branch. It advised Americans to repossess, to take back the rights that had been handed to them by the Founding Fathers, rights that newer generations of Americans had forgot that we had altogether.
And I hope his story comes out. Maybe he'll write an autobiography or somebody will write a biography about him, and those kind of personal things will come out.
Well, it sounds to me like he's an habitual lawbreaker that has no respect for authority. That's the story I'm hearing.
Yeah, of course, that's the way it comes across. And because he's, when you understand our Constitution, the way that Kent does,
and he does, yes,
he does. And we've had very few people, because they don't teach it in our schools, unfortunately, anymore. They haven't for 40 years. So we have a generation of young people that don't know the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence and what all that means and what our freedoms are and what they cost us. And Kent does. And so when he just acts as a citizen should, and has every right to, he comes across as a radical. And it's sad. It shows you where our country is today.